The A-10 Warthog was never supposed to be the glamorous aircraft in a war like this. It is old, ugly, loud, built like a flying tank, and designed for one thing above all else: getting low, getting close, and hitting hard when the fight turns dirty. And that is exactly why its arrival in the Strait of Hormuz matters. Because when the United States starts sending A-10s into a battle over one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth, the message is not subtle. The message is that this is no longer just a standoff. It is a real fight over who controls the throat of the global oil system. Reports from the Wall Street Journal say A-10s and Apache helicopters joined the campaign against Iranian fast attack boats, drones, mines, and missile threats tied to the effort to reopen Hormuz. And that changes the entire feel of the story. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not just another patch of water. This is the narrow corridor through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil and petroleum liquids consumption moves, along with more than a quarter of global seaborne oil trade. When that lane gets choked, the entire world feels it. Not eventually, almost immediately. Oil traders feel it. Insurers feel it. Shipping companies feel it. Politicians feel it. And then regular people feel it at the gas pump, in airline prices, in shipping costs, and in the quiet realization that a map problem on the far side of the world just became an inflation problem at home. So when people hear A-10 Warthogs enter the Strait of Hormuz, they should not picture a random deployment. They should picture a giant sign flashing one sentence in red. America has decided this crisis is too expensive to leave alone. That is the real story. Because Iran's strategy in Hormuz has never depended on defeating the United States in some classic naval showdown. Iran does not need to win a big, cinematic fleet battle. It only needs to make the water feel dangerous enough that the whole commercial system starts malfunctioning on its own. It needs fast boats, drones, coastal missiles, mines, and just enough fear to make tanker captains hesitate, ship owners delay, and insurers raise prices. That is how a narrower, weaker power can still squeeze a global artery. It does not have to destroy the system. It just has to make the system stop trusting itself. Reporting from AP, CBS, and WSJ describes ship attacks, collapsing traffic, and a U.S.-led effort to reopen the waterway after Iran effectively shut it down. And that is exactly where the A-10 becomes so interesting. Because the A-10 is not a symbol of distant deterrence. It is a symbol of close violence. It is the aircraft you bring in when you want to hammer targets that are dangerous, mobile, and hard to ignore. The Warthog was built to punish enemy armor and troops from low altitude, absorb damage, and keep fighting. It is not sleek. It is stubborn. It is the kind of machine that tells you the battle plan has moved past elegant speeches and into the phase where somebody wants threats physically torn apart. That is why the image matters so much. An A-10 over Hormuz is not a diplomatic gesture. It is the visual language of escalation. And here is the first reason that matters for an American audience. The A-10 makes this story feel real in a way headlines alone do not. People know the Warthog. Even people who are not military nerds know the silhouette, the reputation, the mythology. They know it as the plane that shows up when things are getting serious. So the second you hear that Warthogs are now part of the Hormuz fight, the brain stops hearing regional tension and starts hearing, this war has moved closer to direct confrontation. That is the hook. But the deeper point is even bigger. The A-10 tells you what kind of targets the U.S. is worried about. Not giant Iranian warships lined up for some textbook naval clash. Fast boats, swarm threats, small, nasty, cheap platforms that can still create huge economic damage if they are allowed to roam near commercial shipping. And that is a perfect snapshot of this war. This is not only a battle of power, it is a battle of asymmetry. Iran is trying to weaponize inconvenience, uncertainty, and fear. The US is trying to make those tools stop working. And if you want one clear framework, here it is. Iran's whole game is to make Hormuz feel unsafe. America's whole game is to make Hormuz feel usable again. That is the war inside the war. Because reopening a shipping lane is not just about blowing up boats. It is about restoring confidence. And confidence is harder to rebuild than most people realize. One successful drone strike, one burning tanker, one crew evacuation, one mine hit, one viral video of smoke over the water. That is enough to undo a whole day of military success. The market does not care how many targets were hit if ship owners still believe the rout is a coin toss. That is why the battle is so difficult. Tactical wins do not automatically create commercial normalcy. And now the second big reason the A-10 matters. It means the US is fighting this battle closer to the threat envelope than people may be comfortable with. The Wall Street Journal reported low-flying attack jets operating over the sea lanes and targeting Iranian naval threats. That is not remote control theater. That is exposure. That is risk. That is American aircraft deliberately entering a zone where Iran still has the ability to shoot back. And today's reporting makes that painfully clear. The Wall Street Journal and The Guardian both reported that an A-10 was hit and its pilot ejected safely during the broader conflict with Iran. So this is not a cost-free show of force. Iran can still make the sky dangerous. And that is where the story gets really dramatic. Because now you have two truths existing at the same time. One, the United States is powerful enough to send attack aircraft, helicopters, and naval assets into the fight and start dismantling the threats around Hormuz. Two, Iran is dangerous enough that even America's aircraft are not immune. That combination is what makes this a real war story instead of a clean display of dominance. It also means Tehran has entered its own nightmare scenario. Because Iran's pressure campaign works best when the threat is bigger than the cost. It wants to scare the world cheaply. It wants to create maximum economic pain with minimum direct exposure. But once American aircraft start hunting the very tools Iran uses to create that fear, the math changes. Every fast boat becomes a target. Every drone launch becomes a signature. Every missile team risks being tracked. Every move intended to create pressure starts creating vulnerability. Iran can still hurt the system, but now it has to do it while being actively stalked. And that is much harder. Here is the concrete example people in the US immediately understand. Think about the gas pump. That is where this stops being abstract. The average American does not need to memorize Iranian naval doctrine to know what matters. If the Strait of Hormuz stays broken, or even half broken, the fear premium in oil stays alive. And if that stays alive, families feel it. Trucking feels it. Airlines feel it. Grocery supply chains feel it. One narrow waterway can end up raising the price of normal life. That is why a battle involving A-10s over Hormuz is not just a military curiosity. It is potentially an economic event with a fighter jet soundtrack. Now let's talk about what makes this so gripping from a retention standpoint. Because the story has a built-in dramatic spine. The A-10 is old-school brutality. Hormuz is modern global vulnerability. Iran is using cheap disruption. America is using expensive force. And the winner is not just the side that destroys more targets. The winner is the side that shapes tomorrow morning's behavior. Do tankers move? Do insurers calm down? Do prices come back in? Or does everyone stay nervous, delay sailings, and behave like the next strike is only a few hours away? That is why this is not just a battlefield story. It is a confidence story. And here is where most people get fooled. They think if the US strikes back hard enough, the crisis ends immediately. That is the Hollywood version. The real version is uglier. Even if the US tears up Iranian fast boats, even if it degrades drone launches, even if it clears immediate threats, the question remains: will shipping companies believe the lane is safe enough to trust? Because a commercial waterway is not reopened by a press conference. It is reopened when private actors decide risk is manageable again. That takes more than explosions. It takes repeated proof. And that is why the A-10's presence signals something even bigger than escalation. It signals duration. You do not use platforms like this in a situation you expect to solve with one warning shot and a nice statement. You use them when you are settling into the nasty middle phase of a fight, the phase where force has to be applied again and again until the other side either loses capability or loses the will to keep pressing. That is a very different kind of conflict. And there are really only three paths from here. The first path is the cleanest. US and allied operations work faster than expected. Iranian attacks become less effective. Traffic gradually resumes. Oil prices cool off. The fear premium leaks out. In that version, the Warthog becomes part of a story about American muscle restoring order to a vital lane. The second path is the messy one. The US hits hard, but Iran keeps enough capability alive to make the route feel dangerous. Traffic remains thin. Insurance stays elevated. Energy markets stay jumpy. In that version, the A-10 becomes the symbol of a grinding, unresolved campaign where the US can hit back but cannot fully restore confidence overnight. The third path is the nightmare. The battle widens. More aircraft losses, more ship strikes, more regional escalation. Maybe attacks spread beyond Hormuz. In that version, the A-10 is remembered not as the tool that stabilized the lane, but as one of the first signs that the war had entered a far more dangerous phase. That is the whole map. And if you want my honest read, it is this. The A-10 entering the Hormuz fight does not mean the war is suddenly simple. It means it just became more direct, more visible, and more expensive. It means America is no longer just warning about consequences. It is putting iconic close-attack aircraft into a live battle over global trade. It means Iran's maritime pressure campaign has become serious enough to trigger a harder military response. And it means the next phase will be defined by one question above all others. Can the US restore confidence faster than Iran can regenerate fear? Because that is the real battle in Hormuz. Not who can issue the boldest statement, not who trends longer online. Who can make the world believe that tomorrow's tanker either will move or will burn? That is why the arrival of the Warthog matters. It is not just another deployment. It is the moment this crisis started sounding less like a threat and more like a war.